I can't put my life on hold waiting for your mom to die, my boyfriend said. He'd regret the words more than anything. My name is Mara Ellison. I'm 34, and I've taught chemistry at Lincoln High in Portland for nearly a decade. Public school teaching has never made me rich, but I never measured my life that way. Watching students finally understand something they thought they'd never grasp has always felt more rewarding than any paycheck. My boyfriend, Adrian Cole, saw success differently. At 32, he worked in pharmaceutical sales, earned more than twice my salary, drove a black Audi, wore expensive watches, and loved the kind of restaurants where reservations mattered more than the food. For 3.5 years, I convinced myself we balanced each other. He pushed me toward bigger ambitions, while I reminded him that not everything valuable could be measured in dollars. At least, that was what I believed. 8 months ago, everything changed. My mother was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer. The doctors estimated she had about a year, though one quietly admitted it would probably be much less. She was the only parent I'd ever truly had. My father disappeared when I was 6, leaving behind debt and silence. From then on, it was just mom and me. She spent her life teaching middle school English, stretching every dollar without ever letting me feel poor. She took extra tutoring jobs to help pay for college, wore old sweaters instead of fixing the furnace, and somehow made every sacrifice look effortless. I grew up believing she could survive anything. Cancer was the first thing that proved she couldn't. The moment mom became too weak to live alone, I took family leave from school and moved back into the house where I'd grown up. There was never any question about who would care for her. My days revolved around chemotherapy appointments, medications, and finding foods she could keep down. On the worst nights, I sat outside the bathroom while she insisted she was fine. At first, Adrian seemed determined to help. We'll get through this, he promised. You don't have to carry it alone. For the first couple of months, he visited often, bringing soup, keeping mom company, and holding me whenever she fell asleep. I needed to believe him. Then work slowly replaced us. There was always another client, dinner, conference, or sales target. His visits became occasional. Our long conversations shrank into rushed phone calls and, work is insane right now, became his answer to everything. One evening, after I'd spent several minutes explaining changes to mom's treatment, I realized he hadn't heard a word. Did you hear me? Of course. What did I say? I hesitated. You said the appointment was difficult. I hadn't mentioned an appointment. Normally, I would have confronted him, but exhaustion changes what you're willing to fight for. My mother needed constant care, insurance paperwork covered the kitchen table, and every unexpected phone call made my heart race. Believing Adrian's excuses took less energy than questioning them. Everything finally came apart the following Tuesday. Mawson developed a high fever and couldn't keep water down. By evening, the doctors had stopped discussing treatment and started talking about comfort measures. Around 11 that night, after she finally fell asleep, I stepped into the hallway to get coffee. That's when Adrian appeared. I hadn't told him we were at the hospital. In fact, I'd stopped updating him days earlier because my messages rarely received more than a delayed thumbs up. Yet there he was, walking toward me in a pressed charcoal coat, smelling more like he'd come from a business dinner than a hospital. What are you doing here? I asked. I need to talk to you. A cold weight settled in my stomach. Now, I've been trying to find the right time. I glanced through the window at mom sleeping inside. There isn't going to be a right time. Hein took a slow breath. I can't do this anymore, Mara. At first, I thought he meant the hospital. Then he kept talking. I feel like my life has stopped. We never see each other anymore. Every conversation is about your mother. She has cancer. I know. Do you? His expression tightened. I'm 32. I can't put my life on hold waiting for this to be over. My eyes drifted toward mom's room. Waiting for what to be over? Hein didn't answer. I didn't have to. I was waiting for my mother to die. I always imagined betrayal would arrive with shouting or anger. Instead, everything inside me simply went quiet. Okay, I said. He blinked. Okay? Yes. That's all? What would you like me to say? I asked quietly. Should I apologize because my mother didn't die fast enough for your schedule? That's not what I meant. It is. You just didn't expect to hear it out loud. Mara, I still care about you. I looked at him for the long moment. His clothes were immaculate, his expression carefully composed, and not once did he look like a man devastated by ending a 3.5-year relationship outside the room where my mother was dying. You came to this hospital to break up with me, I said. There's nothing left to discuss. Before he could answer, I turned and walked back into mom's room. She was still asleep. I sat beside her bed, took her hand, deleted Adrian's number, blocked him everywhere, and placed my phone face down on the windowsill. A moment later, Mom stirred. You okay, sweetheart? She whispered. I squeezed her hand. I'm here. That was the only answer that mattered. 4 days have passed since then. Adrian hasn't called, texted, or tried to apologize. The hospice nurse says Mom may have days left. Maybe only hours. It's 2 a.m. now, and I'm sitting alone at the kitchen table while she sleeps down the hall. I kept expecting to feel heartbroken over Adrian. Instead, I felt empty. Maybe grief had already consumed every emotion I had left. Or maybe some betrayals are so clear they don't need to be analyzed. The man I thought I would marry couldn't even pretend to care while my mother was dying. That told me everything I needed to know about him. What I didn't know was that he'd already chosen the life he wanted after me, and the woman he'd chosen would soon have a reason to fear my name. 2 Mondays later, Mom died at 6:47 that morning. I was holding her hand. The hospice nurse had warned me her breathing was changing, but nothing prepared me for the moment it stopped. Mom opened her eyes once before sunrise, smiled faintly when I joked, "You first," and a few minutes later her fingers slipped from mine. I stayed beside her long after the nurse confirmed she was gone because letting go of her hand felt like accepting a world where she'd never hold mine again. People say grief arrives all at once. Mine came in waves. It returned when the nurse cleared away her medication, when the funeral home asked what she should wear, and when I opened the refrigerator to find the yogurt she'd asked me to buy only days earlier. The funeral was held that Friday. Teachers, neighbors, former colleagues, and relatives filled the church, while Tessa stayed beside me through every moment. During Mom's final weeks, she'd handled groceries, phone calls, and even argued with the insurance company when I no longer had the strength to. On the morning of the service, she quietly took my phone. "I'll deal with everyone else," she said. "You just focus on your mom." I let her. Part of me kept expecting Adrian to appear, not because I wanted him there, but because after 3.5 years together, and after everything Mom had done for him, I thought basic decency would bring him to the funeral. He never came. No flowers. No message. Nothing. It was as though my mother's death had simply removed the obstacle he'd been waiting to leave behind. After the burial, people filled the house with food, memories, and stories about Mom's kindness. I thanked them, accepted their hugs, and smiled whenever they needed me to. It was easier than admitting I barely felt anything at all. After the last guest left, the house felt unbearably empty. Tessa tied up the final trash bag before turning to me. "You're not staying here alone tonight." "I've been alone every night." "Not really," she said gently. "Your mom was still here." The words hit harder than she intended. "I'm sorry." "It's okay." "No, it isn't. Come stay with me." "I need to be here." She looked toward the quiet hallway, but didn't argue again. Instead, Daniel Mercer, the attorney who had handled Mom's will, stepped inside. "When you're ready, we should meet to go over your mother's estate." I assumed he meant routine paperwork. Mom had spent more than 30 years teaching, lived modestly, and never acted like someone with money. I expected the house, a retirement account, and whatever savings she'd managed to build. Nothing she left behind could possibly matter more than losing her. The following Monday, Tessa drove me to Daniel's office. After reviewing a few documents, he calmly said, "Your mother left you the house, all of her personal accounts, and approximately $2.8 million in investments." I thought I'd misheard him. Before I could respond, he added, "She also owned a 28% stake in Tech Vista Solutions, along with a seat on the company's board." "You have the wrong person," I said. He smiled. "I don't." For the next 2 hours, Daniel explained the life Mom had hidden from me. Her brother, James Whitmore, had built Tech Vista into a company worth hundreds of millions before leaving most of his estate to her. She kept teaching, stayed in the same house, and quietly invested everything because she wanted me to build my own life before ever relying on inherited wealth. "She planned to tell you one day," Daniel said. "After her diagnosis, she updated the documents instead. She believed you already had enough to carry." That answer sounded exactly like Mom. Later, sitting in Tessa's apartment with untouched pizza in front of me, I struggled to process it all. Mom had been wealthy while clipping coupons, owned part of a technology company while grading papers at the kitchen table, and never let any of it change the way she lived. "I don't even know what I'm supposed to do with this," I admitted. "You don't have to figure it out today," Tessa said. "You'll learn." 3 days later she called again, her voice unusually tense. "I found something online." When I arrived, she silently turned her phone toward me. A mutual acquaintance had posted a photo from Le Pigeon. Adrian sat, smiling beside a woman I had never seen before. The woman beside Adrian was elegant, blonde, and effortlessly polished. His hand rested behind her chair as they leaned toward each other, while friends raised their glasses for the camera. The caption read, "When your guy finally finds his upgrade." Both Adrian and the woman were tagged. Bianca Caldwell. The post had gone up the day after Mom's funeral. Tessa watched my expression. "I'm so sorry." I opened her profile. Everything about it fit the future Adrian had always wanted. Suddenly everything made sense. Adrian hadn't left because grief overwhelmed him. He'd already found the life he wanted, someone successful, wealthy, and untouched by hospitals, hospice, or loss. The conversation outside my mother's hospital room hadn't been impulsive. It had been scheduled. I handed the phone back. Block Madison. That's it? And anyone else who wants to keep me updated on Adrian. You're not angry. I think I'm past that. That night, I reopened the Tech Vista files. Halfway through the executive directory, one name stopped me. Bianca Caldwell, Senior Vice President of Sales. The woman Adrian had chosen worked for the company my family had founded, the same company where I just inherited a board seat. Portland had always seemed like a big city. That night, it suddenly felt very small. Over the next 6 weeks, grief shared my life with board meetings, lawyers, and endless paperwork. I spent my days learning Tech Vista's business and my evenings studying reports because I wanted to deserve the position Mom had left me. Then Adrian came back. One morning, my blocked call notifications showed 7 missed calls from different numbers. The first text slipped through before I blocked it. Mara, I just heard about your mom. I'm so sorry. Please let me explain. I blocked the number. An hour later, another appeared. I blocked that one too. By the end of the week, he tried everything. Calls, emails, voicemails, social media accounts I'd forgotten existed. I answered none of them. One evening, Tessa called. He contacted me. What did you tell him? I asked whether he remembered where he left you. The hospital. Then I asked why he suddenly cared. He hung up. The reason became clear the following afternoon. Daniel caught me after a Tech Vista meeting. People have started talking about your ownership. Within days, news that I'd inherited nearly a third of Tech Vista had spread through Portland's business community before eventually reaching Adrian through mutual acquaintances. Suddenly, every desperate message made perfect sense. That evening, Tessa brought over Thai food. Madison called, she said. Apparently Adrian's trying to reach anyone who still knows you. She played only a few seconds of his voice messages before deleting them. He made a mistake. If Mara would just listened, I shook my head. He didn't suddenly become compassionate. He finally learned who you'd become, Tessa said. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. For the first time, his choices had consequences he couldn't undo. When Tessa finally asked whether I'd ever answer him, I looked out at the rain sliding down the window. I already did. When? The night he left me. I never needed to answer again. A few days later, I attended my first official Tech Vista board meeting over Zoom. Daniel offered one piece of advice beforehand. You don't have to prove anything today. I know, I said. I'm just here to do the job my mother trusted me to do. Nearly 20 executives and directors filled the screen. After offering their condolences, the meeting moved through revenue, expansion plans, research spending, and finally, proposed layoffs. Philip shared the financial projections. We're considering reducing about 10% of our workforce next quarter. My stomach tightened. The sales division would be hit hardest. Bianca, Philip said, could you walk us through your numbers? For the first time, I saw her in person. Not in a photo. Not on social media. She appeared on my screen in a navy blazer, presenting confidently, yet her eyes kept drifting toward my name on the participant list. She knew exactly who I was. Her numbers were solid, but when Philip asked for comments, I spoke. I have one question. These forecasts rely on education sector data collected before 2 pending school district contracts were finalized. Could updated projections change the staffing recommendation? The finance director answered first. It could. Philip nodded. Then let's postpone the vote until revised forecasts are ready. The vote was postponed. The meeting ended, I closed my laptop, and that was it. There was no confrontation. I never mentioned Adrian or Bianca. I simply asked the question the company needed someone to ask. Later that afternoon, Bianca contacted Human Resources to ask whether a board member could influence individual layoff decisions. HR explained that staffing decisions required collective approval, but word of her concern quietly spread through the company. 3 days later, Tessa called. A recruiter at Tech Vista heard Bianca was badly shaken after the meeting. HR already told her it doesn't work that way. I know, Tessa replied. Apparently, she still couldn't stop wondering whether you'd find a way. Only then did everything click. Bianca hadn't been surprised to learn who I was. She'd known all along. What unsettled her wasn't my position. It was realizing I had no intention of using it against her. Meanwhile, Adrian's messages became increasingly desperate. Please answer. I know why you're ignoring me. Please don't take this out on Bianca. That told me everything. I wasn't asking for forgiveness. I was trying to protect the woman he'd left me for. A few minutes later, another message appeared. She's terrified she's going to lose her job because of me. I locked my phone without replying. Bianca's career had never been in danger. The only person creating that fear was Adrian. For the first time since the hospital, I understood why he kept chasing me. I wasn't contacting me because he missed me. I was afraid of what I represented. Afraid that the woman he'd abandoned now had influence over the future he'd chosen instead. He mistook my silence for revenge. In reality, silence was simply the place where he no longer existed. The messages kept coming, unanswered. Sometimes I wondered whether he'd already met Bianca before leaving me or whether he'd ever felt guilty about what he'd done. Then I reminded myself that none of those answers could change the past, so I stopped asking the questions. Not long afterward, the estate lawyer suggested it was time to prepare Mom's house for sale. Walking inside alone was harder than I expected. Everything was still exactly where she'd left it. Her reading glasses still rested beside the recliner. An unfinished crossword lay open on the kitchen table, and one of her sweaters still hung behind the pantry door. Nothing inside the house looked ready to let her go. I stood there for several minutes before I could begin packing. Every box felt like another goodbye, but the handwritten notes Mom had hidden inside drawers and recipe books hurt the most. Don't forget to eat. Proud of you. The second one nearly broke me. Around noon, I carried another box to my car and noticed a black Audi parked half a block away. I already knew who was inside. Adrian stepped out looking thinner than I remembered, dark circles replacing the confidence he used to wear so easily. Mara, please, just 5 minutes. I finished loading the trunk before looking at him. I know I don't deserve it, he said. You're right. I've been trying to apologize. You've been trying to make yourself feel better. He frowned. I said I'm sorry. You started apologizing after learning who inherited Tech Vista. The color drained from his face. I kept wondering when you found out, I said. Now I know. He looked away, answering the question without speaking. You really think that's why I came? I held his gaze. I don't have to guess anymore. Han insisted he had panicked. I reminded him he had already planned dinner at Le Pigeon the day after my mother's funeral. His silence said everything. You planned your future while mine was falling apart. When I turned to leave, he called after me. I still love you. I never looked back. Love hadn't been missing outside that hospital. Character had. That evening I told Tessa what had happened. She admitted Adrian had shown up at her apartment too, crying and asking where I was. I asked him one question, she said. Where were those tears when Mara was sitting beside her dying mother? He didn't answer. I know. A week later, Adrian's younger sister Emily called. She begged me to speak with him because he was falling apart. So was I said quietly. The difference is my mother was dying while he decided he couldn't wait. Emily apologized for her brother, but I told her I couldn't help him. She understood, and after we hung up, I blocked her number, not because she'd done anything wrong, but because every conversation connected to Adrian reopened wounds that were finally beginning to heal. The following week, Tech Vista's board discussed a potential partnership with a major education software company. Philip asked whether I could introduce them to a regional school network I'd worked with as a teacher. I made the call. One introduction became several meetings, and by the end of the month, Tech Vista had signed an $8 million agreement that dramatically improved the company's outlook and eliminated many of the planned layoffs, including much of Bianca's division. The irony wasn't lost on me. The woman Adrian believed I wanted to destroy kept her team because of an opportunity I helped create, not for her or for him, but for the company my uncle built and my mother quietly protected. A few days later, Tessa called again. Adrian and Bianca broke up. Why? Apparently, she realized he spent more time worrying about you than their relationship. I looked out the window and realized some consequences don't arrive with dramatic confrontations. They unfold quietly, one uncomfortable truth at a time. By the 12th week after our breakup, Adrian's messages finally stopped. The silence felt unfamiliar at first. For months, my phone had been a reminder of someone refusing to accept that I'd already walked away. Now there was nothing. Tessa noticed before I did. You keep checking your phone. I think I'm waiting for the next interruption. She smiled. Maybe there isn't one. I hoped she was right. 2 weeks later, the last of Mom's belongings left the house. Standing on the porch after the movers drove away, I realized that selling it hurt less than staying trapped inside memories that could never become my future. I locked the door one final time. Thank you, I whispered. Not to the house. To Mom. My new condo overlooked the Willamette River, and for the first time in almost a year, silence felt peaceful instead of lonely. Therapy helped me understand why. When Dr. Rebecca Lawson asked when I'd first believed I had to carry everyone else's burdens, I answered automatically. When Dad left. You were 6, she said gently. Children don't give themselves responsibilities like that. Adults do. That conversation changed something in me. I'd spent years taking care of everyone else. The first person I'd forgotten was myself. A month later, I stood at the podium announcing the scholarship established in Mom's name for future teachers. As I looked across the auditorium, I realized her greatest legacy had never been money. It was the people she inspired, one life at a time. Business at Tech Vista changed faster than anyone expected. The education partnership expanded into additional districts, revenue forecasts climbed, and board meetings shifted from discussing layoffs to planning new hires. After one meeting, Philip called. I don't think we've thanked you properly. I only introduced the right people. That's how opportunities are created. Although I remained on the board, I gradually settled into an advisory role. I never wanted to become a full-time executive. Teaching still felt like home, and my goal was simply to protect what Uncle James had built and what Mom had quietly preserved. A few days later, an unexpected email appeared. Not from Adrian. From Bianca. The subject line read, "Thank you." I almost deleted it. Instead, I opened it. Bianca thanked me for helping secure the education partnership, explaining that it had saved far more jobs than most employees realized, including her own. She admitted she'd expected me to use my position against her, but instead I treated her fairly. Before ending the email, she told me she and Adrian had broken up because she eventually realized he had never truly let go of his previous relationship. I archived the message without replying. There was nothing left to say. Her story with Adrian belonged to them. Mine had ended months earlier in a hospital hallway. The following evening, Adrian sent one final message. It wasn't another apology or another request to meet. It was a long confession. He admitted he had been frightened by my mother's illness, that Bianca had seemed like an easier future, and that only after losing both relationships did he understand the pain he'd caused me. He asked for nothing except forgiveness. When I finished reading, I set my phone aside and watched the lights reflecting across the river. Dr. Lawson had already helped me understand what he hadn't. Regret and accountability are not the same thing. If Bianca had never left, would he have written that message? If I had never inherited Tech Vista, would he still be searching for me? Deep down, I already knew the answers. I closed the conversation without replying. Not to punish him, simply because the woman he was writing to no longer existed. Months later, I sat at a cafe overlooking Auckland Harbour and imagined how much Mom would have loved it. She would have complained about the wind, sampled every dessert on the menu, and somehow left knowing the life story of every stranger she met. The memory made me smile before it made me ache. Gratitude had finally begun arriving before grief. New Zealand was the first destination on the handwritten list Mom had tucked inside an old travel magazine. Iceland and Scotland followed. Beside nearly every destination, she'd written the same two words. One day. She never got her one day, so I decided to live those dreams for both of us. In every city, I mailed myself a postcard. Not because anyone was waiting at home, but because I wanted to remember the woman who had quietly built my future while asking for nothing in return. When I returned to Portland, life settled into a rhythm. Mom's scholarship continued to grow as more teachers donated, and Lincoln High welcomed me back to the classroom. Teaching wasn't the life I had settled for. It was the life I chose. Everything else simply became part of supporting that life. Tech Vista flourished as well. The board focused on growth instead of survival, while I remained involved as an advisor rather than a full-time executive. Protecting the company my uncle built and my mother preserved was enough. A week later, photographs from the newest scholarship ceremony arrived in my inbox. They're framed in my office now beside my favorite picture of Mom, laughing so hard her eyes were closed. No award on my wall means more than that photograph. This evening, after another Tech Vista board meeting, I walked home along the river instead of calling a car. A year ago, I believed losing Adrian had destroyed my future. Tonight, watching the last light disappear across the river, I understood that I'd simply found a different future. The wind carried the scent of rain, a ferry horn echoed somewhere in the distance, and the city continued around me exactly as it always had. I turned toward home and kept walking until the river disappeared behind me.